So, back when I was driving a cab to scrape by, mostly pulling the graveyard shift because the pay was slightly better and there was less traffic. The old timers at the dispatch office loved to spook the new guys. They all had their stories, you know? Oh, man, sorry, old habits. Anyway, they all had these tailies. And the one they always came back to was about Route 13. Said it was unlucky, especially after midnight. Called it the last ride route. Most of us younger drivers just figured it was a load of bull. Just old guys trying to sound tough. Until I picked up that particular fare, one rainy Tuesday night. Then Route 13 didn't seem so funny anymore. The rain was coming down in sheets, the kind that makes the whole world outside your windshield look like a blurry watercolor painting. It was late, maybe 2 a.m., and I hadn't had a fare in over an hour. Just cruising, listening to some talk radio host drone about conspiracies. Then the call came through, pick up at the old bus station downtown, drop off way out on Route 13 near the abandoned Miller farm. Nobody lived out there anymore. Hadn't for years. Weird destination, but hey, a fare was a fare. I'd pulled up to the bus station. It was mostly deserted, just a couple of homeless guys sleeping on benches under the flickering fluorescent lights. Then I saw him standing just inside the doorway, out of the worst of the rain. Tall guy, thin, wearing a dark raincoat, hood pulled up so I couldn't really see his face. Just the glint of his eyes as he looked towards my cab. He was clutching a small, battered duffel bag to his chest. He got in the back, didn't say much, just gave the address again in this low, quiet voice. The old Miller place, out on 13. You got it, I said, trying to sound cheerful. Pulled away from the curb. The rain was hammering down even harder now. The first part of the drive was just normal city streets, then the highway. He didn't say a word, just sat back there, real still. I kept glancing at him in the rearview mirror. Couldn't see much under that hood, just shadows. But there was something about his stillness, the way he clutched that bag. It felt tense, like a coiled spring. We turned off the main highway onto Route 13. This road was always creepy at night. Narrow, poorly lit, trees crowding in close on either side, their branches scraping against the top of the cab, sometimes in the wind. And tonight, with the rain and the fog starting to roll in off the river flats, it was extra bad. My headlights barely cut through the gloom. The old stories about Route 13 started to creep into my head. Silly stuff, but still. Nasty night out, I said, mostly just to break the silence, to prove there were two normal people in this cab. He just grunted in response, didn't even look up. Okay then. We drove on in silence for another 10 minutes. The further out we got, the worse the road became. More potholes, more fallen branches I had to swerve around. The houses got fewer and farther between, then disappeared altogether. Just as the rain, the dark road, and the woods pressing in. That's when he finally spoke again, his voice still low, but with a new edge to it. Anyone ever follow you out here? He asked. The question caught me off guard. No, not that I know of. Why? He didn't answer for a second. Just stared out the side window into the black, rain-lashed trees. Then he said, real quiet, some people, they don't like to be left behind. They get persistent. A little chill went down my spine. What was that supposed to mean? Was he talking about himself? Or someone else? This was getting into weird territory. I glanced in the rearview again. He was looking forward now, but not at me. At the road ahead. Or maybe at something only he could see in the darkness. You expecting trouble? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. He gave this short, dry laugh that had no humor in it at all. Trouble's been my shadow for a while now, friend. Just trying to outrun it for a bit. Oh, okay. Definitely not a normal fare. My hands gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. This guy was clearly running from something, or someone. and I was driving him right into the middle of nowhere. The crime horror alarm bells that every cabbie developed started ringing faintly in my head. Was he dangerous? Or was he in danger? And was I about to get caught in the middle of it? We finally reached the turnoff for the old Miller farm. It wasn't even a road, just a muddy, overgrown track leading off into even deeper woods. This is it? I asked, pulling over as far as I could. Not much out here. This is it, he said, already opening the door. That duffel bag still clutched tight. He fumbled in his pocket, pulled out a wad of cash, way more than the fare, and shoved it onto the front seat. Keep it, for the trouble. And be careful heading back. Some nights, this road ain't safe for honest folks. Before I could say anything, he was out of the cab, hood still up, and melting into the darkness and the driving rain, down that muddy track towards where the Miller farm used to be. Gone, just like that. I sat there for a minute, engine idling, rain hammering on the roof, staring at the spot where he'd vanished. The wad of cash on the seat felt tainted. This wasn't just a fare. I'd driven someone to a place they clearly didn't want to be found, someone who was expecting trouble. What had I just gotten myself involved in, even briefly? Getting out of there, getting back to the main road, that was the immediate escape. The resolution to that specific weird encounter. I didn't see him again, didn't see anyone else. But the drive back down Route 13 that night, it was the longest, most nerve-wracking drive of my life. Every shadow seemed to hold a figure. Every approaching headlight felt like a threat. Was his trouble going to become my trouble? Had someone seen me drop him off? Were they watching? The old-timers' stories about the last ride route didn't seem so silly anymore. I never found out who that guy was or what he was running from, or what was waiting for him down that dark, muddy track. Maybe he was just some poor soul trying to escape a bad situation, or maybe he was part of something much darker. The questions are the things that linger. It makes you wonder about the stories the night holds, the desperate journeys people take under the cover of darkness. And it definitely made me a lot more cautious about those late night fares out to the middle of nowhere, especially on Route 13. Some roads, you just get the feeling, are best left untraveled after the sun goes down. Every neighborhood has its local boogeyman story, doesn't it? Oh, right, trying to avoid those questions. What I mean is, where I used to live, in this slightly rundown district called Crow's Landing, the old folks and even some of the kids would talk about the man in the black hat. Legend had it, if you saw this tall, shadowy figure wearing an old-fashioned black fedora lingering around, someone in the area was about to just vanish. Not like dramatically, just be gone one day. Most people dismissed it as superstition, a way to explain disappearances that were probably just people skipping town or meeting unfortunate but ordinary ends. I thought it was nonsense too, until my neighbor, old Mr. Abernathy, disappeared. And I remembered seeing that hat. Mr. Abernathy was a quiet, harmless old guy, lived a few doors down from me in one of those narrow terraced houses Crow's Landing was full of, kept to himself mostly. Then one week he just wasn't there anymore. Mail piled up, newspapers uncollected. People started talking. After a few days, someone called the police. They went in, found the place empty, no sign of struggle, no note. He'd just gone. It was maybe a week after that, when the talk about Abernathy was still fresh, that it hit me. About 3 or 4 days before anyone realized he was missing, I'd been walking home late from my shift at the diner. And I saw this guy. He was standing across the street from Abernathy's place, under a flickering streetlight, partially in shadow. tall, wearing a long, dark coat and a wide-brimmed black hat. Fedora. Yeah, just like the stories. He was just standing there, looking at Abernathy's house. It was late, the street was empty. I remember thinking it was odd, but I was tired. Just wanted to get home. Didn't think much more of it. Until Abernathy actually vanished. Coincidence? Probably. Crow's Landing had its share of weirdos, but the image of that guy, under that hat, just watching, it stuck with me. A few months later, another person from our street, a young woman named Sarah who lived a few blocks over, also disappeared. Just didn't show up for work one day. Her apartment was empty, like she just stepped out. And this time, I knew I'd seen him again. The man in the black hat, 2 days before Sarah was reported missing. I saw him standing at the corner near the little grocery store she always went to, just watching people go by. Or maybe watching her specifically, I couldn't be sure, but it was the same guy. Same tall frame, same dark coat, same black fedora pulled low. Now I was getting seriously creeped out. Twice. 2 disappearances, and both times I'd seen this figure nearby beforehand. Was it just me noticing him because of the legend? Or was there a real connection? I started paying more attention, walking around Crow's Landing with my eyes peeled. And I started seeing him more often, never up close, always at a distance. Leaning against a wall down a side alley, sitting on a park bench, seemingly reading a newspaper that hid his face, but always near a house where maybe a week later, you'd hear someone had moved out suddenly, or just wasn't around anymore. It was never anything I could prove. He never did anything overtly threatening. He just observed, and then sometimes people would be gone. The crime horror part of this, the part that got under my skin, was the implication. This wasn't a ghost. This felt like a real person. But what was he doing? Was he some kind underscore of incredibly discreet private investigator? A stalker with a very specific, unsettling pattern? Or was he involved in something darker? Some kind of removal service for people who knew too much or owed the wrong people? Crow's Landing had its share of shady dealings, if you knew where to look. I tried talking to a couple of the older cops I knew from the diner about it, about the man in the black hat and the disappearances. They mostly just nodded, looked tired, said disappearances happen, people move on, said urban legends are just stories. One of them, though, a really old desk sergeant named Miller. He got this strange look in his eye when I mentioned the black hat. He just said, real quiet, some shadows are best left undisturbed, son. You see him? You walk the other way. Don't go looking for trouble. And that wasn't exactly reassuring. Then it got personal. I started seeing him closer to my street. Once, standing across from my apartment building, late at night, just a silhouette in a darkened doorway. Another time, sitting in an old, dark sedan, parked down the block, the brim of his hat just visible. Was he watching me now? Because I was noticing him? Because I was asking questions? The fear was a cold knot in my stomach. This wasn't just a creepy local legend anymore. This felt like a direct, albeit silent, threat. I started taking different routes home, varying my schedule, always looking over my shoulder. My small apartment suddenly felt like a trap. The resolution, if you can call it that, came about a week after I saw him parked on my street. I was jumpy, paranoid, barely sleeping. One afternoon, I got an eviction notice. Bogus reason, something about building renovations. My landlord, a guy I barely ever saw, was suddenly adamant I had to be out in 3 days. No discussion. I knew somehow it wasn't about renovations. It was a message. Delivered indirectly. But clearly, I didn't fight it. I packed my stuff, what little I had, and got out of Crow's Landing. Moved to a different part of the city, far away. The immediate threat, the feeling of being watched by that hatted figure, it receded once I left. That was my escape. But the mystery, the unease, it never really went away. Who was the man in the black hat? Was he a real person? A sort of grim reaper for the unlucky or the indebted? Or was he just a symbol, a figment of a neighborhood's collective anxiety that I'd unfortunately focused on during a string of unrelated disappearances? Sergeant Miller's warning suggested he was real and known. Maybe some people operate just outside the law, in the shadows, performing tasks no one wants to acknowledge. The legend of the man in the black hat might just be a local way of trying to make sense of those disappearances, a way to give a face to the unsettling feeling that sometimes vanish. And sometimes there's a quiet observer in a dark hat who sees it all, or maybe even makes it happen. Some small towns, man, they just have this way of holding on to their secrets real tight. Oakhaven was definitely one of those places. It looked peaceful enough on the surface when I first drove in. Picket fences, little church with a white steeple, American flag on every porch. The whole charming small town vibe, but asked too many questions about what really happened at the old parish mill down by the river 30 years ago. That's when the smiles would get a little tight, the eyes a little guarded, and you get this real quiet suggestion to just let sleeping dogs lie. I was in Oakhaven trying to trace some family history, specifically about a great uncle who supposedly worked at that mill and then just vanished around the time it shut down. I guess I just couldn't let it lie. My great uncle, Silas, he was the black sheep, apparently. No one in the family talked about him much. All I knew was he'd worked at the parish mill in Oakhaven in the early 90s, and then he was gone. I don't know, no trace. The mill itself closed down not long after, under some kind of cloud. Fire, they said, or maybe bankruptcy. Stories were vague. I'm a freelance writer, always looking for interesting historical mysteries for articles, and this felt like one. Plus, family connection. So, I booked a room at Oakhaven's only B&B, the Willow Wisp Inn, planning to spend a week digging through local records, talking to old-timers. The town was small, real small. Everyone seemed to know everyone. And they all seemed to know I was the outsider asking questions about Silas and the old mill almost as soon as I checked in. Mrs. Gable, who ran the B&B, was friendly enough at first. Oh, the old parish mill. She said, when I asked her about it over breakfast, terrible tragedy at fire. Took a lot of good jobs with it. She didn't mention any disappearances. I started at the local library, which was tiny, run by a very stern-looking librarian who seemed to know every book by heart. The local newspaper archives from that time were incomplete. The weeks surrounding the mill's closure, pages missing. Convenient. I asked the librarian about it. She just pursed her lips and said, "Oh dear. Must have been water damage over the years." Didn't look like water damage to me. Looked like careful removal. Then I tried talking to some of the older folks in town, the ones who might remember Silas or the mill. Found a few at the general store, a couple more at the little diner. Polite, friendly even. Until I mentioned Silas by name or the specific circumstances of the mill closing. Then the shutters would come down. Can't say I recall much about that, son. Long time ago. Best to let old sorrows rest. The same kind of vague, dismissive answer over and over. It wasn't just forgetfulness. It felt coordinated, like a town-wide agreement not to talk about it. It was so bad that they couldn't even mention his name. The crime horror part of my brain, the one that sniffs out cover-ups, started to get very interested. This wasn't just a forgotten man. This was a story someone actively wanted to keep buried. One old guy at the diner, Mr. Peterson, who seemed a bit more talkative after his third cup of coffee, did let one thing slip. Parish Mill wasn't just a mill, he said, his voice low, glancing around the near-empty diner. Some folks said Old Man Parish was involved in other things that weren't strictly on the level. After your Uncle Silas disappeared and then the fire, well, some folks figured it all just got too hot to handle. He wouldn't say more, clammed up tight when I pressed him. But it was the start. Other things? What kind of things? That night, I couldn't sleep. The town felt different now. The charming picket fences seemed like barriers. The quiet streets felt watchful. The next day, I decided to visit the ruins of the parish mill itself. It was down by the river, about a mile out of town, mostly just a collapsing brick shell, overgrown with vines. Signs everywhere said, "No trespassing." I ignored them, camera ready. The place was eerie. Silence except for the wind whistling through the broken windows and the rush of the nearby river. I explored carefully, filming the decay. Found what looked like the old office wing. Most of it was gutted, but in one back room, half buried under fallen plaster, I found a rusted metal filing cabinet. Most drawers were empty or filled with mushy water-damaged paper, but one, stuck tight, took some effort to pry open. Inside, remarkably preserved, was a thin ledger. My heart pounded. This was it. The entries were mostly payroll, boring stuff. But tucked into the back, there was a separate section. Different handwriting, cryptic notes, dates, initials, references to shipments, night meetings by the river, payments, no questions. And then an entry dated just a week before Silas disappeared. Ease. Asking too many questions, becoming a problem. Needs to be silenced. Silenced. A cold dread washed over me. This wasn't just a local tragedy or a cover-up of negligence. It sounded like murder, and my great-uncle Silas had stumbled onto it. I took photos of the ledger pages with my phone, then carefully put it back, trying to leave everything as I found it. As I straightened up, I heard a noise from outside the offside. A car engine. Coming down the old, overgrown access road towards the mill, who would be coming out here? Panic flared. I didn't have much time. Scrambled out of the office, looking for a place to hide. Ducked behind a crumbling brick wall just as an old, beat-up pickup truck rumbled to a stop near the mill entrance. Two guys got out, big guys. Locals I thought I recognized from the general store, the ones who'd been particularly tight-lipped. They weren't carrying fishing rods. One had a heavy-looking crowbar. They started walking towards the office wing, towards where I'd just been. Were they here for the ledger? Did they know someone had been asking questions? Or was it just routine for them to check on the old mill, make sure its secret stayed secret? I didn't wait to find out. While they were inside the office wing, I could hear them moving around, muffled voices. I made my escape. Slipped out the back of the mill, through the dense undergrowth, and ran along the river bank, away from the access road, back towards town. Didn't stop until I was well clear. Getting away from the mill, knowing those guys were there, that was the resolution to the immediate threat. I was safe. For now. I left Oakhaven that same day. Didn't even go back to the B&B for my bag, just called Mrs. Gable later. Made up some excuse. Asked her to ship it. I had the photos of the ledger. I could go to the state police, maybe. But what proof did I really have? Old notes in a forgotten ledger? Two guys with a crowbar at a derelict mill? It still felt thin, and potentially very dangerous for me if those prominent town figures Mr. Peterson hinted at were still around and still powerful. The secret of Oakhaven, the fate of my great-uncle Silas, it remains buried. the town continues to guard its silence. It's a chilling thought, isn't it? That whole communities can conspire actively or passively to keep a dark truth hidden, and that sometimes the most peaceful looking places hold the most unsettling secrets. Secrets they're willing to protect, quietly but firmly, from anyone who asks too many questions. Makes you wonder how many other Oakhavens are out there, nestled in quiet valleys, their deadly secrets sleeping just beneath the surface.